Hi there, I'm Dr. Kim Ernest, and this is the How to Be Happy Hour. Today, we will be talking about all things related to mental health and fatherhood.
Hi, I'm Dr. Johnny Pierce, better known as Aviva and Indigo's dad. I'm a clinical psychologist and I work in private practice.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Reese. I'm a father to Elijah, and I'm a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Pennsylvania, and I work at Pennsylvania Counseling Services as an assistant clinical director.
Hello, I'm Tim Nicholas. I'm a licensed social worker. I have a 21-year-old daughter and an almost 18-year-old daughter.
Ooh, wow.
Still surviving.
And I'm Mike Ernest. I'm a licensed professional counselor here in PA. I work at Pennsylvania Counseling Services in the IT department, and I am a dad to Silas, who will be 8 in like five days, and Jorah, who is 5 years old. So.
That's also my husband, y'all.
Yep.
So we can
Yeah.
eliminate
Should
the
be
elephant
fun.
in the room
Should be
here.
fun.
But I invited him here today because he's a phenomenal dad.
Thank you.
So y'all, how do we think the relationship between stepping into the role of being a father impacts the mental health and wellness of that father? And are there any caveats that we should keep in mind in supporting our clients either transitioning into that role or our clients who might have been in it for a while but are trying to navigate it well?
My mental health's definitely improved since I became a dad. Without a doubt. I remember planning to be a dad long before I had the opportunity, and it's even better than I expected it to be. I think that in some ways, because I didn't have my dad in my life, it was something that I really did want to think about ahead of time, not just kind of stumble into. I was fortunate. I met my oldest when she was 5. Her mother was a single mom when I met her. And one of the best moments of my life, I'm washing the dishes. Her mom's taking a shower. She's in the living room, and she says, "Johnny, I like you being around." And I said, "Oh, I like being around too." I've been dating her mom for a couple months at that point. And then she says, "Johnny, I like you being around, and I want you to keep coming around." I said, "Yeah, I want to keep coming around too." And she said, "Like a dad, I want you to be my dad."
Oh.
And yes, at the time, I had to, of course, be mindful. I'm like, "Have you talked to your mom about this?" And she's like, "Yeah, all the time." And I'm like, "Okay, well, we're going to make sure we bring this up with your mom when she gets out the shower." So when she got out the shower, I'm like, "Yeah, she's got something she wants to talk to you about." And I was like, "Did you tell her what you told me?" And she said it again without hesitation. "I want Johnny to be my dad." And I've been very fortunate that I've been her dad since then. Not in that conversation, but a few months later, it was pretty clear I was going to be around, and I'm her dad now. And she got something, and she had more sense than I had when I was her age, because I would have loved to have had a dad. But I didn't welcome somebody being with my mom. I wasn't up for that at all. Can't have both, kind of. But she had more sense than me, and although she don't always showcase that sometimes with her decisions now, she did in that moment, and I will forever be thankful for her in that way, because she's the reason why I'm a dad. My youngest is 3, but my oldest is, I got my oldest and my only. And yeah, so thank you for that, Aviva.
I'm with you, Johnny. I can't see myself not being a dad. I just love it now, but I can't say that I felt that way in the early stages. I mean, not that I didn't enjoy it. There were definitely parts that I really enjoyed at those young stages, but I like sleep. I like having a little bit more autonomy. That was hard. I remember my mom and mother-in-law. People would just always had to remind me, like, "Hey, this is it's a phase. It gets better." And
When does it?
I love it.
I said 21-18.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the sweet spot. Like 5 to 7-year-old boys. They love, playing sports and hanging with dad. So that doesn't change, right? They always want to be with you.
Yeah, now you can tell when they come in with the Ring doorbell at like 3 in the morning.
Oh, don't say that. I very much enjoy it. I cannot imagine, not being a dad. If you would have said, if I would have, if you would have told me when, at 1 and 2, I would not have believed you that I would have felt like this. But I love it.
whenever my wife Erin found out that she was pregnant with Elijah, I remember like having those feelings like, oh wow, this is really exciting, kind of like what you guys are talking about. But I also remember like feeling like I was on this seesaw of like, oh crap, like there's gonna be a little human being here in about 9 months, and I'm gonna have to like, I don't know, like continue to like work on myself, continue to like grow, and like it's not just gonna impact me, it's gonna impact him in lots of ways. And I remember whenever Elijah was born, we came home from the hospital, and Erin wasn't really able to do too much because of how the birth went. And I remember sitting on our couch just crying, like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can love this kid. Oh my gosh, like, I don't know, like, if I can do this. I don't know if I'm cut out for it. And Erin very lovingly looks at me and says, Jonathan, go to sleep. She said much nicer than that. But, like, that whole process, and, like, we're only, like, I don't know, 14, 15 months into this thing. And it's like, man, like I find myself having more confidence with it and a good place, but man, I also find myself saying like, holy smokes, Elijah, like, I'm sorry. Like, I messed up there. I don't know what I'm doing and stuff with it.
Did you mess up there?
Oh, I did. I definitely did a couple of times.
Is he still alive?
He's still alive, but, you know, I do apologize to him a couple of times.
Yeah, my first fatherhood experience, you know, you go through the classes, and I paid half attention and everything. So, unfortunately, my wife had to have an emergency C-section. So we get to the hospital, and, you know, she's out, and they bring the baby in, Lindsay, and I'm like, oh, my goodness. Kind of like you, like, what do you do? And then it's like, okay, it's time to change the diaper. And I'm like, totally changed it wrong. I'm like, oh no, how am I going to figure this out? But you never feel prepared. I mean, and you still, you know,
Yeah.
or even at 18, 21,
No, yeah.
you go through different stages. You kind of learn, and you try to make smaller mistakes, but you never quite feel prepared for that. But you have lots of support systems, talk to other people, sometimes in the mental health system, sometimes just with friends, like, hey, how do you handle this? What did you do? What worked? What didn't work? And sometimes it's trial by error.
Well, you mentioned it in terms of clients. I actually haven't had any clients become fathers while they were working with me. Most of the clients that I've had that have been fathers were already fathers, and those who were involved in their children's lives, many of them felt very good about being dads. They had their moments where they, you know, did I get this right, or whatever the case may be. But for the most part, that was one of the few areas of their life that they felt good about. That, you know, I see my kids, you know, if they were with their partner still, then, you know, we're working it out in part because of the kids. Like, the kids were a motivating factor to be well. So I haven't had the benefit of working with someone as they transitioned into fatherhood, but for those who I was working with who were fathers, that's typically what makes them light up. You know, they'll be down on work for reasons and down on relationships for different reasons, but unless there's chaos going on with their kids, they typically feel really good about being dads.
Yeah, I like that. You remind me too. Like I I have that same feeling now. It's like if I have a rough day at work or so, I don't know, something's bugging me. It's I don't know. I guess I before becoming a dad, I would have assumed that like having little kids around the house would have exacerbated that. But I like find myself looking forward to coming home, and it just, I don't know, it puts things in perspective. So I definitely can relate to that.
Yeah, I've actually made my work schedule around my kids.
Yeah,
I
I
work
love
3
that.
days a week, and the other 4 days, it's all about the girls. And when people like try to schedule with me and they'll ask like, oh, can we do it Thursday or Friday? I'm like, nope, that's a daddy day.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, yeah, I only work 3 days a week. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I work 3 days a week, and the other 4 days I devote to my kids. And I was fortunate. I had time. Parenthood didn't fall on me. I kind of ran into it.
Right.
So because of that, I was able to think about, hey, I can't work like this if I want to be the kind of dad that I want to be. I've got to find a way to change the structure of my life. And fortunately, Jonathan and I have been working together in the past. He got to see most of this from the very beginning as I was changing my schedule, and then when I became a dad.
So you're intentional about it.
Always.
I love that. Yeah.
Had to be.
That's cool.
Had to be.
It's interesting y'all bring that up, because one of the data points that I had prepared for today is this idea that work-life balance impact, and how that is cited as one of the biggest struggles that fathers face, and balancing their work life and their family responsibilities. And those who struggle to maintain that balance report higher levels of stress and poorer mental health. And figuring out how to maintain the balance, it sounds like with some intentionality and some other bits and pieces there, can be exceptionally beneficial in improving the overall mental health of the father and reducing stress levels. So, what thoughts or ideas do y'all have about being intentional in creating and maintaining that balance?
I think for me, one thing that I'm learning is that the quantity of time, like it matters, but it doesn't matter in the same direction, because I have to be emotionally available to my wife and to Elijah with everything. And that's like that's been a big shift for me to like kind of learn some of that stuff, like being emotionally available for her and him, like where they're at in those moments. And because I've seen so often where like dads will like, say like, okay, like Saturday is just like the day or Sunday is the day. And then like they like think that's enough. And maybe for some people that is, but like for, I don't know, Elijah and Aaron and me, like that's just not enough time. It has to be like every day, like, how am I being vulnerable with both of them in everything that we do?
I think oftentimes we talk about things in culture that have gotten worse. I think one thing that's gotten better is historically I'm of a certain age around this table where, historically traditional roles of the mother staying at home, the father going to work. So the mother puts kind of her identity in being a mom, and a dad in bringing home the bacon, the bread, and different things like that. And I think, even in my own both spiritual and cultural background, just kind of giving into that, realizing, no, my identity isn't in work. Work's very important to me. I love what I do. I love the mission. I love serving. But really, my own spiritual faith and being a dad. And that wasn't my background. That's not how I was raised or in the circles and in the cultures that I grew up in. So just really changing that focus of, I'm a dad. That's
Not
one of
a
the most
paycheck.
important things in my life. And I, both in spiritual world and different things in churches that I grew up in, seeing where the focus was more about other things than even for pastors. You look at their kids, and my dad was a pastor, so I kind of have that perspective. And there's kind of like, oh, what's pastors' kids are always, well, there's a reason. There's some issues there. Present company excluded. Didn't get caught. But just that awareness of, even when I started at Pennsylvania Counseling, was so much my identity, work. And again, work is important, but work allows me to be able to spend time with my daughters and build into them. So, yeah, that culture shift, I think, has been a positive in areas where culture hasn't always shifted well.
No, I would agree. And I mean, I grew up obviously with someone who is very work driven in terms of my father. And so I had a good dad for all intents and purposes. And I had a dad that would work 22 hours a day, often multiple days in a row. And so I would go throughout the week and not really see him all that much. Like, it just was the norm. It was the expectation. And one of the things that I'm citing here is that studies are really showing how significant the role of a father is in a child's social emotional development. And I think historically we've often put not all of the weight, but we've put a tremendous amount of that weight on the parent that stays home. And I think even now that's becoming a little bit more split. Like, I know in our community, there's like a little subsection of stay-at-home dads, and it's like you've got the mommy groups, but now we got some daddy groups getting started, and I think that's kind of cool to see emerge. And I imagine as we move forward, even that balance will become a little bit more in balance.
So
But
are you saying someday we're going to hear an NFL player say, "Hi, Dad"? Like, is that? Are we almost there yet?
I
Tim?
sure
Are you
hope
thinking?
so.
Like,
I
yeah?
mean, I think it would be amazing because that positive paternal relationship contributes both to the father's mental well-being and the child's mental well-being. And so that conceptualization of I'm just a paycheck, or it's my job to be the provider within the family subsystem, isn't serving our dads any more than it's serving our kids.
Yeah, I felt early on, I still feel it some too, that like because of those traditional roles that I would feel guilty that it's like I want to spend more time with my kids than focusing on professional work life.
What are you doing?
Yeah, no, I know, and I feel bad my employer is probably going to listen to this at some point. But I feel like a lot of times it was that, my kids would be getting in the way of my work, and I find myself more now thinking a lot like, work is getting in the way of me spending time with my kids. And I think, knowing what 18 or almost 18 and 21, like I am aware that my kids will not always be 5 and 7 and not always desire to spend as much time with me. So like I said, being in that sweet spot of where I feel like I am now, anytime my kids say they want to spend time, it's like, have you ever looked back and said, I regret that I spent so much time with my kid? Why did I spend time with my kid? You never regret it. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, that I'm soaking it up. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was one of those rare souls that COVID actually benefited me. I hated the news about people losing their lives and the things that were going on. You saw kind of terrible stories out there, but my youngest was born in 2020.
Wow.
And I got to be there for everything. I was there for the birth. I was there for the first steps, first words, first meal, first everything. And I cherished every bit of it because she's the only one I'm having. I'm not having no more kids. I got my oldest and my only, and that's it. And to be able to be there for everything and to have those memories and have those moments, I'm never going to get that opportunity again. And I never have to look back and say, man, I wish I had them. And those 4 days, I typically spend most of those 4 days with her because my oldest is in school. But, we do daddy school. We end up being in some of those mommy groups because we go to the library every day that she's with me. And on Thursdays and Fridays, they have these little programs for the little ones to get together. It's been great. It's helping her socialize so she can get ready for school in the fall. And there's maybe you'll see a granddad in there. Maybe you'll see another dad here and there. I saw 2 on the same day last Thursday. I was like, all right,
Unicorn!
we're growing,
Taking over the world. So.
But, it's typically a room filled with moms, and they're kind of looking at me like, or babysitters, and they're looking at me like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, yep, I'm here. Yep. The librarians don't know my name. They only know my daughter's name. They're like, Indigo's dad? I'm like, that's good. That's a good way to know me. That's the only identity you need to know me by.
But it kind of brings that idea of these societal expectations surrounding fatherhood and norms. And I know I don't want to throw you under the bus, but I remember when we had our oldest that you had gone to like 3 really long days. Like we had struggled to find childcare. I mean, I think a lot of people struggle with that particular problem, especially now. I think we're struggling with it even now to find like after school childcare is damn near impossible. So if anyone is looking for a part-time job in Hershey, Pennsylvania, reach out. But it's this idea or this concept that men are supposed to work outside of the home. And so to stay home with your kids is somehow less than, or there's sort of these expectations where people, I think you had said, like, oddly complimented for fathering. And so that kind of have you ever been oddly complimented for just kind of showing up and being a dad? And is that tied to some of these societal expectations and norms surrounding masculinity? And is it somehow less masculine to be a father? And how does that all shake out, or how do you synthesize that?
It's funny, I was at the office yesterday, just societal roles, and I was washing dishes, and someone said, hey, does your wife, should I take a video of showing you do this? I'm like, no, I do this at home. I actually enjoy the dishes. It's peaceful, it's quiet, it's a task, it's complete. So just kind of those expectations, like, no, yeah, I enjoy
I
being
also
a dad.
wash dishes at home.
Did you wish you had a son? I have 2 daughters, so, and whether I had a son or not, like I wasn't one of those people like has to be a son, has to be a daughter. Like I love my kids, whether they were boys or girls. But I do still get that question. Like no, I love my kids. They're fun in different ways. They're all very unique in different ways. So yeah, some of those expectations of fathers, even fathers and sons, or different things like that. I think you have to kind of challenge.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I get the question all the time. Like, do you wish you had a little girl? Nope, I do not. Nope, I'm not here for unicorns and dance class. But you do you, boo. I'll be at t-ball practice. Like, that's what fits for me.
Yeah.
But it is curious how much that expectation that parents would want. Do you get the same question?
Oh, the best part is my oldest, she is so confused when it comes up because it happens regularly. Like, when they're with me, like, we go to the market, we do stuff. So people will say as they see us in the parking lot, wow, you're a good dad. And my oldest looks at me like, why are they saying that to you? And I'm like, buddy, the expectations that people have for dads is exceptionally low. So the fact that they are seeing me with children is sufficient for me to be a good dad. And I'm like, you're going to ultimately be the judge of whether or not I'm a good dad, you and your sister.
Now, I do got to say, when I took my daughters to the American Girl doll store in New York City, paid a crap load of money, and I'm sitting there with dolls for like a $35 hot dog. I was a good dad. I'm just saying that I will accept the compliment.
Max level daddy.
Yeah, like sitting there next to a doll, like tea party in our house.
That is
that's one
definitely
thing,
a unique
but,
experience.
yeah, that I'll take the compliment. There.
Yeah, I think the jury's still out on if I'm a good dad or not. I think that my daughters will ultimately be the ones who determine that. I feel like I'm doing the best that I can do, and that's what I challenge myself to do. I'm constantly looking for ways to improve, handle things better. When people compliment me, I really try to figure out what the expectation was. So a guy once, we were in a Whole Foods, and I was trying to tell my daughter to get something out of the freezer, and I could tell that she couldn't understand what I was saying. So I started using colors as a reference point, like, do you see the yellow thing? And, walked her through it. I'm like, the thing next to it. And she's like, okay. The guy saw us interacting in the market, but didn't say anything. We get out to the parking lot. Parking lots apparently are the place to talk to me when I have my children. And the guy's like, hey, man, I saw you in there. It's really good seeing you being so patient and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm just like, thank you. And that's all I could think to say because, yeah, man, I got two of them. And, like, if I'm not patient with them, then we all gonna be in trouble. Like, I had to come to the table knowing that was something that I had to strive for. I wasn't always good at it at the beginning, but I knew this is something that I'm gonna have to work at. So kind of putting the carrot out in front of myself instead of expecting myself to have it already has really helped me.
Yeah. I mean, you never arrive as a parent. I mean, we make mistakes, and I think one of the things that I heard from a friend that was really helpful was like, when you make a mistake with your kids, which you will, apologize. Like, own it, model that to them because, I had a really good experience with my dad, but he was away a lot, but he was a good man, generous. But, I never heard him admit faults a whole lot there, and I can kind of get to lean towards that way and just, when you make a mistake, own it. Yeah. Model that. Your kids, it's important for them to see that because if you create this level of perfection, well, they know that's not true.
Right.
But to be able to see that in you, that you're willing to own that and model it for them has been very helpful. So
that is good
for me.
No, I agree. Same here because I'm hard on myself too. Yeah, I agree with the modeling that, and I had good parents growing up, so I'm not complaining, Mom.
Notice he said mom. Notice he said mom.
My dad is no longer here, but yeah,
Dad won't be listening.
Yeah,
to the
Dad's not
podcast.
listening. But I never remembered my parents ever. Hey, I got that one wrong. I don't know. I feel like that is a newer.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think my parents.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. It's just
My mom would say I'm sorry, but she would never say she was wrong.
Okay. Yeah.
I read a book probably about a year ago called "What's So Amazing About Grace," and
It's a very good book.
it is. I'm a Philip Yancey fanboy. That's the author. I don't get any profits for any of the sales, but that whole topic there of like like admitting when you mess up and like showing like that grace, compassion. It was like, man, like I didn't like see much of that either, and it's like, man, like now how do I as a dad like actually show this to myself and then show this to like another human being? And it's so much like this thing of like why have I had to apologize to Elijah? Because he needs to see that, even though like he's like 2 months old and like can't understand a single word I'm saying probably. But it's like that whole process of like, okay, like using the resources that are out there. Like for me, like there was a spiritual resource that was helpful for me to help guide and direct like that life compass of like knowing what are the values that I'm going to instill in not only myself, but also Elijah with this stuff so that he has some healthy exposure and healthy experiences so he can figure out who he wants to be as a person.
As you're talking, what feels really salient to me is this, and I don't know if y'all have had a similar experience, but and you don't know yet because you only have one right now.
Yeah.
But I feel like I am a way better parent to my secondborn than I am to my firstborn. I think that I've learned some things along the way. I put some things into perspective. I think my oldest, I see a lot of, it's always hard when you look at your kid and you see something in your kid that you don't particularly care for in you. That's always a really humbling, like, meta process. And I think one of the things, like, I'm extremely hard on myself. I think I've gotten better over the years at being less hard on others. But still, like, if I make a mistake, I'm like, you fucking idiot, what's wrong with you? Like, and that's like the internal dialogue. And then I started seeing my kid
Yeah.
respond
Talk about
really poorly to his own mistakes. And it's just like this, like, Kevin Home Alone moment, like, oh, there it is. Like, there's the thing. And so I think that now my youngest, he makes a mistake and he's like, you live, you learn, we're moving on. Like, he's good, he's fine. And I think that, like, some of the things that I've carried and demonstrated and displayed for my oldest, he's internalized, whereas I've been able to pivot with our youngest. I think also, like, I have a lot lower standards for myself now that I have 2 versus 1.
How about realistic?
Yeah, more
I think
realistic.
real-
No, I
honest-
think
honestly, I mean,
significant.
yeah,
No, our
realistic.
oldest were like, no screen time, tummy time, 45 minutes a day. Like, this is the schedule.
you're a
Our
psychologist,
youngest,
come on.
yeah,
You're the
attachment
parenting expert,
parenting,
right? Yes.
always. With my youngest, it's like, yeah, you want cinnamon sugar toast for breakfast? That's good. You'll be fine. You'll run it off on the playground. Let's do it, buddy. It's fine. So
And the thing is,
standards change.
You can be the same person, the same parent. Your kids are different.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
also true.
Kids are different.
Also
so you
true.
have to modify your parenting style. It's just funny. My my oldest said to my wife and I the other day, it's like, that standard was never for Emma, the youngest. It's like, well, no, yeah, she's different. You're different. We've learned. We've adapted. She didn't really like that answer, but it's true. If I parent my youngest the same way that I do my oldest, it's not going to work. So you have to have kind of your style, your philosophy, who you are as a person, as a dad, but also you have to be flexible because kids are different. And if I try that same thing, it is not going to go well. I can look at my oldest and she'll go to tears. My youngest, she'll be like, bring it on. Let's go.
Sounds like mine too, because I've got the added feature of I'm not the biological dad to my oldest.
A little extra,
So
right?
there's this kind of cautiousness about, are you treating them different based on that? And for me, that's not my view. Like, I've never been stepdad. I've never, like, we went from Johnny to dad within a span of 5 months. Like, it was, I'm dad, I'm going to be dad, I'm here, regardless of whatever happens, I'm here. And trying to understand my oldest, because I'm coming into a story that's 5 years old and now 9 years old. So I've been around for 4 years, but I wasn't there for the first 5. And trying to be understanding of the fact that she's still learning how to have a dad. She's still learning how to have 2 parents who are paying attention. And, her mom and I, we've gotten much better at co-parenting, but it wasn't always easy and we weren't always on the same page and, like, navigating that. Whereas my youngest, much of that working out has taken place while she didn't need us to have to work it out.
Right.
Her consequences were pretty straightforward. If she got in trouble, rewards were pretty simple. So by the time she reaches 5, she's not ever going to really know that Mom and Dad used to struggle to be on the same page from time to time because we'll have it figured out in many ways because we're already figuring it out. So, yeah, that wrinkle, it's a fun wrinkle.
Yeah, that's a little extra.
I love, though, that you highlighted, like, parental expectations for their kids in that. And we just had a whole training yesterday for our family-based program all about adoptive parents and kiddos that typically enter into the family system through adoption. So they didn't know either of the caregivers prior to the adoption process. But one of the things that has a tendency to really exacerbate the challenges in navigating this new family system is the expectations that the parent has for the child. And one of the general themes that were showing up, and you can't paint with so broad a brush, right? This doesn't apply to all adoptive family systems, but that many adoptive parents have expectations of gratitude from their children. And, like, gratitude is not a feeling
It's something
that
that's
kids
taught.
are developed, like, their brains don't have it. And yet we expect these kids to, like, well, I do all this for you. Why aren't you showing gratitude towards me? Because they can't feel that yet. They don't have it yet. They
Also,
need a
look at the
more
reference
developed brain
point.
to know it.
Look at the reference point. Like, okay, so I'm coming into your home because you said you wanted me here. Aren't you grateful for having me?
You picked me.
You picked me. You picked me. Yeah. gratitude is one of those things that's a beautiful concept. I think it's a very adult concept.
Yeah.
And I think as you expect it from children without teaching it to children, so you don't model it yourself, then you're setting yourself up for conflict because you're going to feel unappreciated and that you're doing all this hard work. Like, I hear so many people talk about parenting and it's hard and it's hard and it's hard and it's hard. And it's like, okay, so what were you expecting it to be? Like, you are going to help create a new human being who has no reference point besides you. You don't get a manual on who this person's going to be or how to do this. This is the biggest challenge of your life.
And they're independent entities from you.
Yes.
They're not an extension of you. They're not a product you're creating.
And that's one of the
No,
that's one of
go.
those pieces too. I forget the original question, but basically that was one of the areas where, coming from our firstborn, where it was like you get all these classes and you have to get everything right, and if you don't, then you're going to screw them up for the next day. It's going to
Forever.
for everything, right? And it's gonna cascade, and they're gonna turn into terrible humans. And so you put all
Go
that
to
pressure.
jail.
Yeah, you put all that pressure on yourself, and then I feel like you realize when the second one comes around just how, not to say that parenting doesn't matter or what you do day to day doesn't matter, but I really have tried to shift my focus on watching them grow into the people that they're going to be, instead of making them into this,
Fit into this.
into this mold that I want. And I just feel like it's taken a huge weight off of my shoulder. It makes parenting more fun, honestly. You can
Yes.
enjoy the process more, and you're not I feel like parenting has become a verb now instead of I don't know. It's just you're doing parenting instead of just being a parent being there.
Yeah, that makes
Does
sense.
that make sense?
An adjective
Absolutely.
versus an adverb. I dig it.
Yeah.
I wasn't great in all the English verb stuff.
Is that right?
I was with you in spirit.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I got that one right. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, we joked around that, like, with our kids, there's so many amazing things about both my daughters, but it's kind of like this nature nurture, and that kind of like Frankenstein experiment. Like, took some of my most stubborn traits and my wife's few stubborn traits, and you put them in there together. It's like, wow, how's this gonna turn out? You just never know, and you see how those interactions are with your kids, and try to show them love, but in different ways, because they're very unique and are going to challenge your parenting styles that you thought you had it right here. It's going to challenge you to be a different type of dad, in our case, in these situations.
Yeah, I found that experience to be what helps me enjoy the process, this idea that I don't have it figured out and that I'm going to have to keep paying attention and I'm going to have to keep learning. Like, each year, I mean, my 3-year-old, she's only 3, but at 1, I could see some of her personality starting to come out. At 2, it was pretty clear, okay, this little girl's going to have some personality. And now that she's kind of gotten a bit more socialized and she's talking to other people more, the effect that she has on other people, I mean, Kim's gotten to meet her, and she brings joy out of people.
That's awesome.
And that didn't come from me. Like,
You're not the joy guy?
I am a jolly person within myself, but I don't typically emote joy out of other people. Like, I make them think. And they're like, oh, I don't want to think. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I say things and ask questions. But she brings joy out of people, and watching them light up, we'll go into whatever place we're going into, and she'll just engage people, and they just light up, and oh my God, and being around for that and witnessing that, like, I don't know who she's going to be by the time she grows up, but I hope she never loses that, because, man, it's an amazing trait that I don't believe that she got from myself, and her mom will say she didn't get that from her either.
Well, we were all happy to see you when you showed up this morning. So
You all were, because you all have acquired the taste. Oh, the acquired. You have acquired it, and I love you all so much. It took years. It took years for us to get here. She does it in moments. It's instantaneous.
Oh man.
As you're talking about that, Johnny, I'm thinking about Elijah and how, like, a couple weeks ago, we were somewhere, and just like Elijah, who's like 15 months old, like,
He's a big boy, too.
interacting, and he's a boy, like,
big boy.
Big boy, big cheeks, looks exactly like me, I guess. I hear, but like, just seeing like how he interacts with other people, and like the warmth that he gives them, but then also like, because he's a baby, I guess, like, he's super direct, like, with things. And it's like, then seeing him like interact with stuff like at home and like discover things, it's like, man, like, I have a lot to learn, like, from this kid right here.
Right.
That, like, as we become like adults, like we just like overlook right there. And it's like, man, like if I have this quality of time at home with him, or if I have these quality like interactions with him and just like watch him and like remind myself like of what you guys were saying, like I don't have that figured out. It's like there's lots of cool things to learn from him that I don't necessarily have to like teach him, and it can be more of this, I guess, collaborative thing.
Wait till
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot more. So like I'm sitting here, I'm like, man, like I should have brought my notebook and like taken notes from you guys.
I love hearing you talk about that. Like in probably one of the best fatherhood advices I got was just enjoy each stage and season. And I honestly didn't enjoy the baby stage as much. It was always like, oh, I can't wait till they're like 3 or 4 or 5 or
More active.
do different things like that. But yeah, it's just so important to enjoy the moments that you have, Facebook memories, and like get all these memories like, oh, that's when they were this age, or different things. If you go into my office right now, I have, again, they're almost 18 and 21. The pictures on my desk, legit, go into my office, they're like 3 and 5 with the Grand Canyon, or, it's like, that's how I still see them as like little girls, even though they're at an older stage, but just enjoying each of those different moments, because it always seems like, it's not only in parenting, but in anything, you're always like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Work, where am I going to get to here? And different things like that. So just, I love hearing you just be able to appreciate that stage where you're at right now.
Yeah, I didn't get that until my second one. I felt like it's like this goes really fast. I really do need to enjoy the young ages, but yeah.
Yeah, I was warned. I was warned ahead of time. Like,
Yeah, I was warned too. I just didn't believe it.
well, no, they knew that they need to get across to me, because they're like, you've been pretty obvious about the fact that you're only doing this one time. So like, you really need to. And like I said, I got to be there for all of that stuff, and nobody gets you more excited about things you are already aware of than your kids will. Going on, the girls and I will go on trails, we'll just go on walks, and the things that they just like attend to. My youngest loves squirrels. I've never cared about squirrels. They don't do anything to move me emotionally at all. But the glee in her heart when a squirrel goes darting past, now I want to be around squirrels so that she can have that experience.
Note to self, we all know what Johnny's gifts for Christmas
There you
are
go.
going to be right now. All squirrel, all the time.
I'm not going to take her to Ann Arbor because we got some pretty aggressive squirrels there. Because I've seen people get beat up by squirrels on the campus of University of Michigan. So if you're in the Ann Arbor area, leave the squirrels alone. They will beat you down.
Noted.
You just totally cut out our Ann Arbor podcast.
All right. Hey, go blue, class of 08, but stay away from the squirrels. They will beat you down.
As you're talking there, Johnny, and like as the rest of you are talking about like going slow, I think like there's a certain softness with that how the stereotypical dad is portrayed. Like they're not someone that's soft. Like there's someone that's either an idiot or there's someone that's like a hard ass. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, like if those are like the two extremes there with being a dad, then like, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. Mm-hmm. So like the softness piece, I think is such like an undervalued, like whether it be Hollywood cultural thing, whatever, like it's so undervalued. Mm-hmm. That like it brings me joy to like hear you guys talking about that softness there, because it's like, okay, like this can be a normal thing and this can be a good thing for our kids.
There's times where I think because of that expectation, and like we deal with this every once in a while, where it's like you need to come down harder on that. Like we need to be on the same page, and
if you can imagine in our relational dynamic who the hard ass is in the family.
Well, but it's not like I want to.
It probably rotates. No, never.
Yes, Tim.
Thank you. I got you.
Thank you. but no, I do. I think there is some overcompensating, because that is one of the my problem areas, I guess, is anger, where
Areas of growth.
The areas of growth. Thank
There you go.
I-
Tim
thank
is the
you.
man for
That's
that.
right.
He is.
Right.
Very
Thank you for the
sage like.
concerns, growth.
But I do find myself, trying to overcompensate for that. So it's like I just never want to yell at my kids, and not to say that I haven't. I certainly have.
Oh yeah.
But so I don't know. I feel like I do try to overcompensate. I'm to a fault, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I think as each of you were talking, the one thing that was sparking in my mind, I guess, is this idea or this area of like curiosity and leaning into like I would never have been inherently interested in Pokemon characters. Like that just isn't, it wasn't a part of my childhood. It's not some, but like my kids are Pokemon experts. They know what regions they come from, what evolutions they have. And right now, if I want to talk to my oldest and have like an ongoing conversation, it's going to be about Pokemon. So I need to either like catch up or be left behind. And I think so often we have expectations like I will engage with my child on my terms. And it will be about things that I want to talk about. And usually it's stuff that, like, I get why kids aren't like, how was your day at school? What's your favorite subject? You know, like stuff that adults want to have conversations about. But kids want to show up and have conversations too about things they're interested in. And so often I have to be like, hey, I don't know the evolutions of Eevee. Can you teach them to me? And then he's like, sure can. And then 20 minutes later, it's like, okay, I've got my notebook out. Like I'm learning. But I think there's so much value in inverting the power dynamics within the relationship. And I know as a mother that that's certainly important, but I think in fatherhood as well, like passing them the mic and being like, no, let you be the expert and I'm going to learn from you, has a lot of value for them in developing their own confidence and autonomy. And then just also feeling like special because you're interested in what they're interested in.
Yeah, it really is hard, and God bless our single parents, single moms, single dads. And that is tough work. It's tough being when you have support of two people, two loving people involved with the kids' lives, and because sometimes that balance will come out between my wife and I, and sometimes I'm more of the, hold the line, and sometimes my wife is more hold the line. Or if I've frustrated at work or other things going on, and my temper is short, she can step in and be like, okay, I got this, or kind of like, well, get out of the way so you don't blow up in the kids, or vice versa. She's had a rough day. So having that balance is sometimes always striving for that balance within yourself, and that's all part of our all growth. But having, whether it's a spouse or community members, that part of your community, your tribe, to help support your village, to help support you, is so important. Because it's hard. We're wired a certain way, but kids need both. They need that love and grace and that structure and discipline.
Absolutely.
And accountability. Finding that balance is tough.
So, Mike, when you brought up being angry, it made me think about some feedback that I got from my oldest. Something that's really important to me is respect. Like, it's absolutely important. It's a foundational principle. But with my oldest, when I came into the picture, I felt like she had not learned to be respectful. She would say some really out-of-pocket stuff to her mom, and I'm just like, yo, like, that's your mama. What are you doing? Like, I wouldn't have teeth. Aren't you afraid? But I think early on, I came in a bit heavy-handed in terms of, like, really trying to assert, like, no, you're going to be respectful. Like, you're not going to talk to her like that. And, like, she was never really all that disrespectful to me early on, but I just would have a very strong negative reaction to her being disrespectful to her mom. And one time, my oldest told me she was scared of me, and it broke my heart because I was like, oh, no, that's not what we're going for here.
Right.
Respect doesn't mean you fear me. No. So we started to work back from there, and I started to ask, like, what am I doing that's making you feel afraid? And she was like, well, the way you look at me sometimes, or when you yell at me. So we started to scale back to the point where yelling's a very infrequent thing now. It's something that I really have tried to shy away from. My mom didn't raise me with yelling. She always said that, it's an ineffective way of communicating. But she would do this thing where she said, do I need to raise my voice? And I knew the answer to that was always no. So
Picked up on that one, right?
Yeah. She gave me context clues. Like, the answer is always no to this one question. But been working on that with my oldest, and I would say over the last year, I've seen a lot of progress in being able to, when I get frustrated, when I get upset, to be able to express that better. Because I'm trying to get her to express her emotions better. I got to be willing to express mine better. And I'm seeing some growth in how she's doing that, because she's now got somewhat of a model. Like, oh, okay, I can get upset and it's still okay. We still love each other. We just have to figure out a way to talk through this. And it's one of those things that you just kind of add a little bit to your bucket every time you see that growth in your child and you feel that growth within yourself. Like, man, I would have handled that so much worse a year ago or 2 years ago. Now, that doesn't bother me the same way. I've kind of assimilated to, this is going to happen. It's going to be okay. I'll redirect you this way, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I can definitely relate. I had a similar experience where, and it like, I was like wake up in the middle of the night and hate that I did this, but he was,
When you yelled at the kids about the yogurt.
yeah, it was, I mean, it was,
You clearly don't.
I mean, this was.
it was,
Forgive and forget. You know.
Mike doesn't yell much.
I try not to. Yeah, I really
an
don't.
angry dude.
And it really wasn't that big of a. We're setting it up like it's this big deal. It really was. But we got in the car, and it was one of those rough day at work the day before, no sleep. It was just everything was set up to me not to handle this right. And he was like 2. He was a little kid, 3. I don't know.
Well, he should know better.
He
was
should know
3.
better. That's
Come
what I
on.
right. Yeah,
Whoa.
I know. Well, trust me. In retrospect, that's yeah. But we gave him like a yogurt pouch in the back. He didn't like the flavor of it, and he threw it to the front seat, and just yogurt just went all over the roof of my car. It wasn't. I mean, not cool, but like I lost it, and I yelled at him, and it was that look of fear in his eye, and I didn't. You could see it immediately, and I never wanted him to be afraid of me. And it's a tough balance to strike, the respect versus being afraid. But that was a moment where I was like, I can't do that anymore. So I can.
But
relate.
I think that so often, like when I'm working in family, like context of family therapy, fear and respect were synonymous.
Yep.
Throughout
Oh,
many intergenerational patterns. And so if we think about themes that get transmitted through generations, that concept of fear equals respect.
Right.
And I think that's something that, especially generationally, we're not seeing it that way anymore. But that's a hard pattern to break.
I'm just curious if y'all have experienced like where if you're out in public, like this is why I hate. They're good now. They're ages now. When we fly with them, it's not as big of a deal. But it used to be where like I would dread it so much because they're kids. They're gonna cry on a plane. They're not. It's hard for adults to travel, and I'm guessing it's pretty hard for little kids too. But I always would look around and like you could see that people are like, are you gonna like yell at your kid for doing it? It's like no, I don't. But like it's this pull of like these people are. I don't know. Should I yell at my kids? Everybody thinks I should yell at my. I don't know, but I hate those situations where it's like I'm trying to be a better father, but society is kind of nudging you in a different direction.
What's far more likely for me, Mike, is that I am out and about and I see other parents parenting in my mind poorly, such as like if you're walking through a parking area, why are your children behind you?
Right. Yeah.
Why not have your children where you can see them?
Right. Or is there a parent anywhere near around?
And also like if you're walking out in traffic, maybe you have their hands so that the car can see the 6 feet tall or 5 foot so person versus the little bitty person. Those kind of situations I will be in the car ranting about for quite some time, and my oldest will just shake her head, and I'm just like, you gotta value your kids. You gotta value their lives. Like you gotta protect them. And she's like, Dad, it's okay. We don't know those people. Right. Like, but the kids. But the kids.
But I think that's when, at least when I've yelled at my kids, it has almost always been out of fear.
Oh, safety.
Almost
safety.
always out of fear, almost always out of safety. And I can remember a time, and it's traveling too. It's always traveling.
Traveling's
Brings out the
terrible with
worst
kids.
in you. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm going to go away and have these magical family moments. It's like, rah! But we were at baggage claim, and my kid was trying to climb into the baggage claim.
You gotta love kids.
And people are grabbing stuff off. Like, it's like the Hunger Games in there. And I remember telling my kid, like, hey, back up. You're going to get hit. Hey, back up. You're going to get hit. It's like, back up. You're about to get hit. And some lady's like, how dare you?
Oh, yeah.
And
She
do you
got
remember that?
Yeah,
one?
it was weird.
She
It
approached my kid. She's like, are you okay? And I'm like, do not talk to. Like, at this point in time,
Wrong
ma'am,
question to ask.
you are about to not be okay.
Apparently, she hasn't listened to your podcast.
No, but I think there's a lot of judgment then too. Like people want you to intervene and parent your kids, but then there's also a very high level of like judgment by surrounding parents, and this lady was older. I mean, I'm assuming she was a parent.
There's
at
this
some.
protocol that nobody gets, that this is the way that we're all supposed to do this in public spaces. And, since nobody got the actual protocol, it's just kind of a hodgepodge of what the person feels like in that moment.
Well, and frankly, I had told him thrice with a different tone. Like, now I'm going to yell because he needs to I don't want him to get hurt.
Right.
And so I think that so often it's always in those moments where I've been the most dysregulated, it was out of fear. And I'm not always proud of it,
Right.
but also let me solve the problem,
Right.
ma'am. Like, you can walk away now.
Who are you, strange person, and why
Who
are
are
you walking
you? Don't
or
talk to
talking
my
to my
kid.
children?
Yeah. I feel like too that another area where I short circuit and make mistakes is when, I mean, the fear or the safety thing is definitely one of them, but also it's like when I'm put in a situation where like I don't know the right answer right now, and it's like you have to act right now in the moment, and it's like then that's typically when I get myself in trouble. So I don't know. That's another one.
Yeah, I've been trying to do better with not seeing everybody who tries to talk to my kids in public as problematic. It is hard. It is hard because, I mean, during COVID,
Yeah.
you know, that was actually like my kind of stomping grounds of learning like how to be a guardian of little people. So, you know, we got to do the 6 feet back. We got to have masks on. We got to do all this. And then coming out of that, it's like, okay, people are getting closer now and getting closer. And I remember we were walking through a market one day and this woman just like let go of her basket and almost hit my oldest. And I grabbed the basket and looked there like, pay attention. And that was the nicest thing I could say because everything in me wanted to scold her beyond repair because my 6-year-old at the time is not looking for a basket to be coming towards her. And I'm just like, what are you doing? We're in a supermarket. Why would your basket get away from you? But, you know, just learning that other people are just humans like me. They are making, you know, the best decisions they can with the attention span that they have. So they may or may not make the soundest decision around my little precious people. And I cannot hold them to the standard of expecting them to care for them as much as I do. So it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a challenge for me. Still growing in that department.
Absolutely, and those attention spans are dwindling.
Oh my God!
Quickly.
I'm just
Everybody's
watching the
are.
cart like come across. Like, is that cart gonna hit her? What is happening right now?
Yeah, I once had employees say, you know, I hired some good people and some people that were not so great in our system, and then said, you know, what I've noticed is the healthier the person in leadership, the healthier the system. And the same is true for us as people. We started off talking about mental health as men, as fathers, and the healthier I am as an individual, the better employer I am, the better father I am, the less likely I am to yell or to not react. And it's all part of that growing into becoming better in our own spiritual lives, our own mental health, whatever areas are significant to you, has a significant impact on raising kids. I remember one time had 2 kids, had the minivan. You know, I'm used to driving. I grew up in South Jersey, so Philly. You know, so middle finger
That's
out
some
and
driving right there.
hand on the horn, circles, survival of the fittest. You know, and so that's how I grew up driving. And then I'm in a minivan. Okay, a minivan with 2 daughters, my wife, and the guy cut me off. Maybe, kind of. I assumed they cut me off. And I'm like, you know, riding up on the bumper with a horn. And I just, you know, it's one of those things you just catch I mean, my wife was yelling at me, rightfully so, but you just catch yourself
In the rear
mirror,
view.
like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? What? So just being a better human being in my own anger and emotional regulation, but also how that translates into being a parent is significant.
Well, Tim, you threw me a nice softball pitch there
There you
because
go,
research shows there is a significant correlation between paternal mental health and child's emotional development.
Well, and I couldn't agree more with what you said. I one of the things the older my kids get, and just it's not even being a father; it should be this way in general. But
We would hope.
yeah, absolutely. But it's like, you know, when you know there's definitely warning sign. Like for me, like as you know very well, not getting a full night of sleep is like a big one for me. It throws me off the next day. But there are days where I know that I'm not going to be 100% my best self, and I've really tried to get better, and I hope I've gotten better at this, of just being intentional about like, look, I am not at my best today. I have to put in a little bit extra for today. I got to be a little bit more patient than I normally would be. So just being mindful of that. So I what you said really spoke to me. So.
And I'll take that a step further. My oldest, I will tell her because we all kind of have this. It's awesome. It's cute. So my oldest is more likely to act like she's still asleep if I come into their room. My youngest will wake up and announce, "I am awake." This is how she starts her day. She used to start her day singing. I wish that would come back, but I'm in a loft and the girls are in a bedroom downstairs, and my oldest say, "Dad," or youngest will say, "Dad, I'm awake." I'm like, "Okay, good morning." She's like, "Good morning." And then when I come downstairs and go into their room, she'll greet me with the giant grin, and my oldest will act like she's asleep. But she and I have worked on checking in with each other to start the day. How did you sleep? Did you sleep well?
Like that.
How are you feeling this morning? So we've established that we all check in with each other and start the day by trying to figure out where we're at. And if I don't sleep well or I'm tired, hey, I'm gonna be tired today because I don't do naps unless your sister sleep on me, and then I'm gonna fall asleep when she's on me. But other than that, I don't do naps, so it might be a little bit of a tougher day. And we work through the day together instead of it being just surprise after surprise with each other. And the kids will help you out. Like, depending on how old they are. The kids are very, very quick to pick up on what's going on with us, especially if we give them a hint. And you'd be shocked. Like, they'll find ways to, okay, I'm going to play by myself today. Or, like, let me maybe be a little more hands-on with the younger sibling. So recruiting your kids to let them know, like, hey, I didn't sleep well. Or, hey, I'm not in the best mood. You don't have to get into every intimate detail, like, I'm stressing over money or something like that. Like, no, you're like, oh, God, we're going to get kicked out?
Well, one of the things, too, that I've noticed, and you've helped me with this a lot. It's like when I'm in a tough spot or I'm in a bad mood or I'm short-tempered, I guess I was thinking that my 5 and 7 year old would think like, hey, Dad's having a hard time. Let's rally. Let's help him out. And it is the complete opposite. They pick up on that, and I think it throws them off. And
You
it's
should
like,
have a wrestling match at the grocery store.
yeah, no, it always seems like if I am not at my best self, they pounce on that.
That
and
might be the
take
difference
advantage of
between boys and girls.
Maybe so, yeah.
Girl dad.
Yeah.
But my oldest will often pick up on, like, I think he's a little bit more into, my youngest is like, let's see what we can do with this opportunity. But I think our oldest very much will say, he's like, Mom, I think you might need a snack. Because they know I get hangry, and I do. I get hangry my whole life. I need to eat more. And so he'll give me like, Mom, get yourself a snack. Like, I will. Let's get a snack.
Learning early.
Learning early.
Yeah, I share this with people. My oldest, I'm my own prayer walk and different things. So I should have my oldest to be more assertive. I mean, both my girls are amazing, but my oldest, just help her to be more assertive. She's just a little more confident and tough. And my youngest, less assertive. So just trying to find that balance up, because they are very different. You always want some balance, not too much assertion, but not so shy that you're gonna get run over in the world too. So always trying to have supports around you to help
Yeah.
grow and develop.
Ours is more confident, not quite so confident friend.
On that
Too confident.
on that assertive piece there, Tim, I was reflecting on a lot of the clients that I've seen over the years, and I think I've only been able to recognize this because I've also had to recognize it within myself, is that somewhere along their life, like, they had this internal voice that was stolen from them or taken away from them, or they gave it up from someone. And usually that comes back, I think, to the father in lots of ways, where the father is like that primary bully on them. And then that impacts their ability to be assertive with other people. It impacts their ability to develop that confidence and such, because they weren't given that space to figure that out, which then I think causes a lot of these mental health problems, causes a lot of this addiction and other stuff that we see within the populations that we work with. So I think whenever, like, I consider the, like, role of a father and such, it's like, okay, like, how do I give you a voice while I also still search for my voice for who I am as a person?
I've done a lot of work with different clients over the years who really struggle with that negative self-talk and that self-critical. And when we start to unpack it, it's like, but what's the voice sound like? And it's so curious when they start mimicking the voice. Well, it's like this. And it's like, oh, and who does that sound like? And then as we sort of pull those threads, they start to realize, like, oh, that's my stepdad's voice, or that's this voice, or that voice. And it's like, man, we think we could give that back to them at some point in time. And finding different ways to hone what voices have been internalized that are no longer serving you.
Yeah.
And how can we let those voices kind of fade into the background noise versus hyper focus it? Because obviously, like, developmentally, of course, kids hear their parents' voice the loudest.
Yeah.
And then ironically, I guess when they hit teenage years, they hear it the quietest.
Right.
Like, and
Let's go deaf to it.
yeah, they go deaf to it. And it's not there's actually studies to support that actually happens for them. It's not even that they stopped listening to it. Like they hear it less loud out of the ether. But when they're little littles, that is their lifeline to survival. So of course they hear those voices the loudest. And something that I've been curious about as we are each having our conversation here today is how does your child's mental health impact your mental health? We've talked a lot about the one direction that it goes, how paternal mental health impacts the mental health of their children. But the inverse, when your kids are struggling, when your kids are going through something, what does that mean for y'all?
I think one of the toughest challenges for me is, and probably for all of us, is that you want to protect your kids, right? I mean, that's a good, healthy thing, but knowing if you over intervene and not allow them to experience some of those things, and I'm sure it's true for sons as well, but that father-daughter part, like, man, you just want to protect your girl and her heart, and yeah, just allowing some of that wisdom and discernment to allowing them to go through things, or breaking up with a boyfriend, or not getting that job, and allowing them to kind of absorb some of that, because some life, spoiler alert, life isn't handed to you and everything goes well. And I think in some ways we've tried to do well by protecting our kids, but sometimes it can go so far. So yeah, allowing them to experience some of that, but being there, being present, being forgiving, being humble to like, hey, how was that? That was really difficult. How did you deal with that? And even when they've done some things with grades or different things, of just having some understanding, but allowing them to go through that, but also being there for them. I think we're raising kids at a different time where like no one went to therapy when I was a kid. I mean, really, it was like, it was really ostracized, like it was really serious things. Now, if you don't have a therapist in the generation of my kids, 20 and younger, it's like, well, what do you mean you don't have a therapist? Well, my therapist said this. So I think there's a lot more mental health availability, which I think is very helpful at least in our American culture here. The society is more open to that, to helping them out with that.
That's another one of those things where intentionality, at least for me, it's one of those things where like, eating right and exercising, I know that that's the right thing to do, but like doing it is not always easy. And that's one of those, like, I don't want to be a helicopter bulldozer parent, but it's hard to not intervene too much. Because you do want to protect your kids, and but no, you're right. I mean, that is where they learn resiliency, how to seek help from other people too. That's I don't know. With our oldest, it's like, I'll talk to your teacher. We'll talk to your teacher about that. And it's like, well, no, you should. Why don't you ask your teacher for help? Or like seek, and that's really. I know where a lot of that resiliency and skill building comes from, but it's hard to know that your kids are hurting inside and all you want to do is protect them and help them feel better. But so no, I guess all I'm saying is it's a work in progress always for me. I constantly have to it's a fine line to toe.
Right. And that goes back to earlier, if you go too hard, hey,
yeah,
going back and apologizing, because we are going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
We're realizing, no, I should have intervened there, and I think protected him too much, or maybe the teacher wasn't terrible. Maybe it was
Right.
actually you. Let's look at that. I'm thinking it was you, but let's look at that.
Well, and I remember too, like as like when we're in public, and this doesn't mean that I want to let my kids just go do whatever they want and let consequences, But I've tried to get better at like I try to prevent them from doing something that will upset somebody else, I've tried to get a little bit more not to say let somebody else parent, but maybe the person who works in the restaurant will let you. Like I think it stings a lot more coming from somebody else sometimes than the comfort of.
I think there's value in natural consequences.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to
There's
say.
value in
Golly,
natural
there we go.
consequences. Like it's not like we're
That's
going to
what
let you run into traffic.
Sure.
Right. That's a natural consequence, a bit too far.
I told you
but-
not to run in the street, and you didn't listen.
Now you're not here anymore.
Yet,
You only had one chance and you blew it. There you go. But no,
That's what I was going for.
in the practice that I'm a part of, we actually have a book club, and we read this book about the calling of America.
Jonathan Haidt, right?
Jonathan Haidt.
Jonathan Haidt's a great one.
Yeah,
And
great one.
there is a quote at the start of a chapter that says, "Don't prepare the child for the path. Well, don't prepare the path for the child. Prepare the child for the path." And that as soon as I read it, I'm like, I love this quote because it's everything that
It's
I
giving me
felt like
chills.
I was
yeah,
raised
that's-
by. I feel like my mom did an exceptional job of getting me prepared for the reality that is there's going to be challenges in your life. You're going to be equipped to overcome them. Go live. And I'm attempting to do that as a father. And as things come up with my girls, obviously with the 3-year-old, it's not so much processing together right now. But with my oldest, we have a kind of post-event conversation. Okay, what happened there? What do you think? How do you think it could have gone better? How could I have been a better support? Like, we have those kind of conversations, and I don't believe that's typical. And I don't believe that's what's expected of dads. I think that might be expected of moms in some ways. But I don't think that's expected of dads. And what I've attempted to do in doing that is to normalize the fact that things don't always work out for you, but that's not something that needs to be seen as calamitous. It's just something that that didn't work out. Learn from it. If it comes your way again, you'll handle it better next time. And the balance of where do I intervene, where don't I intervene, I typically think about it from what can she recover from? And how can I instill confidence in her by saying, I believe you can tackle this challenge. And even if you get beat by it, I believe you'll be able to get up and do it again next time. And it's working so far. It's not always easy to watch because, man, you just see some little person out there having a hard time and you're like, is this going to be the thing you talk about in therapy in 5 years?
Right.
I don't know.
Right, and especially when you see things in society that are not right and are truly not fair, and I can't change that. None of us can change that. So helping, when you start to make that transition where that innocence of that child is kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
this isn't, and finding that balance of it's not right, it's not fair. This is where it can change. This is where it may not change. How do you process living in this world where the teacher, society, whatever culture is throwing at you?
Well, and I feel like we could have a whole podcast on that book. So yeah, it's a really good book.
It was a really good book.
But I feel like that's been a big help for me when talking about being like a helicopter bulldozer parent. That he talks about. I forget what age his kids were, but they live in New York City, and he said, I let my 9 years old,
they're walking to school and stuff like that.
He's like, they'll walk 8 to 10 blocks to the bagel shop to get breakfast for the family, and then they'll walk back, and like that. And now it's like that's like, but people look at that like it's crazy. But I like the idea that like if you give your kids, and it is a balance, a little bit more than you think, that they grow into that.
Scaffolding.
It's like, and that's one of the pieces in that book that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, it's a good book.
With you guys talking about this stuff, I'm thinking like, man, Elijah's like 15 months old, and it's like that
Man, you're
fear
gonna be like the
piece. And
perfect
I know I'm gonna be the
father, just like we
perfect father
said.
after this podcast. Thank you,
We said there's
Tim.
no perfect
Oh
dads.
man, I've got
There you go.
Jonathan Reese.
This is gonna be great.
Look it up in the book.
But like that fear piece, like I can relate with aspects of that, even though Elijah is so much younger, and that he's behind and like crawling. So it's like, oh man, like I have this fear of like that stuff, and like man, like doing tummy time when he was younger. It's like, oh man, I hate seeing
He's
this
not
kid
way
cry.
behind.
Well,
That's what I was
according to early intervention, he's behind. But then also like too, like medical stuff that he had too. It's like, oh my goodness, like seeing this kid like. And I'm like building up all these stories in my head, like this kid is gonna be traumatized from this ER visit that he had, and having his head wrapped up and everything. And it's like seeing the resiliency inside of him, like how he responds to stuff and how he's learning to like move and do stuff in his own way. Like I think in a way, like it translates resiliency to like Aaron and I in this way of like, okay, like Elijah can like overcome things, and like he can do stuff. He can figure out stuff, and like what our expectations were versus what's actually going to happen are different, and that's okay. So I think it's funny, like no matter where you're at in this fathering, parenting like journey, there's aspects of like all these themes, right, that tie together in different ways. So I guess it's nothing that you're ever gonna grow out of or get done with, right, Tim? I don't know. You're a little further.
Nope, yeah. I'm at the stage where it's just fun. Not always fun, but it is fun just to be just in a different role with my daughter, especially my 21. I mean, she's 21, so she's living at home now and finishing her senior year, and it's just been interesting to watch my dynamic with her and my wife's dynamic. I'm like, she's 21. I don't want to know. I mean, she's 21. I mean, there's some rules, but honestly, I'd rather not know.
Yep.
Like, my 17-year-old. Yeah, no, we're still on lockdown there for some things. But there, and it's just that transition, and just even the different types of the level of conversation from a 3-year-old tea party or whatever whatever you guys are doing, Pokemon challenge,
Sure, yeah.
Pokemon challenge to. It's just moving from that father parent to almost not quite friend, but you're getting to that stage. So it is fun most of the time to get to that stage and move into different areas.
And I'm curious because you have older kids, but like I've always said that like kind of like my true north, I guess, when it comes, there's always strategies and things that you can try, but like I know they say I'm not your friend, I'm your dad, and I get that, but I feel like for me, I always want to keep a solid relationship, not just necessarily a dad, but like you were talking about, or Johnny, maybe it was that, like showing genuine interest in what your kids are into and joining them, and for me, and I know it's not this easy, but it's like I want to lay the foundation at these younger ages where
Right.
when they are 17, 18,
They will
19,
want to come back.
they
To
do
you.
want to come
Right.
back. Hey, I know I can go to dad to talk about something that's kind of a sticky situation or something that I don't know.
And sometimes going to dad, my oldest is more likely to come to me, and my youngest is more likely to go to my wife, and that's okay. Not that my youngest doesn't come to me, but there is that level of we just naturally connect. And if if you're a single parent, there's probably hopefully someone in your community that there's people, good adults that you can kind of lean on, because we do click and connect in different ways. And it's I'm sure, Kim, you never turned on your dad, right? You never left. It was always sweet. My oldest, it was kind of that way. My youngest, now she's starting to come back.
One of my favorite Roy stories to hear him tell while Kim was present was how one day apparently Kim got upset with him and told him that she wasn't going to be his friend anymore. And he said, well, that's okay. I still love you. And I've definitely had similar kind of conversations with the girls where it's like, I love you and I will always love you. I will always be proud of you and I will always love you. You don't have to earn those things. But I'm not your friend, and I'm going to upset you from time to time because I'm going to tell you no.
Right. Yeah, that boundary has to be there. And when you've done the front work
Right.
of that love and your own personal growth, they'll accept that.
Right.
Oh, my youngest just the other day said, well, then I'm never going to cuddle you ever again. And I said, well, that would make me very sad, but the answer is still no.
And he cuddled you that night.
and then of course, like,
I don't know.
bluffing, bro. I know it.
Y'all youngest is he's gonna be fun.
Oh, yeah.
He's gonna be fun. He's clever.
He announced to a group of children at a birthday party this week, a laser tag birthday party, that if they die in the game, they die in real life. And I immediately
I
had to
gotta
be
meet
like,
this kid.
"Guys,
I met
that's
the
not
oldest.
true. That's not true.
I got to meet the oldest. I gotta meet this youngest. I gotta meet
man,
him.
He's a trip.
Oh man.
Yeah, well, my youngest, I can give her a compliment. Well, she'll take it like, we're kind of in that stage, but she's starting to turn. I was sharing with some friends, like, she just got a job, and I went in there, and she's got other jobs, and I go in there, and she's like, who's this? She didn't know me, or, right away. I saw her lean over to her coworker. I said, that's my dad. And, honestly, almost brought tears to her eyes. I look at the lady, like, hey, she acknowledged me. Where did that come?
You exist.
I did something right, But there's seasons. You go through seasons when they're infants, toddlers, and the various stages of adolescence as their brain is still fully developing, and you just try to have that relationship there through those ups and downs that they will come back.
And I think it's a good idea for us, and I know we haven't touched on this, but I think dads, whether you've got a dad in your life or guys who are dads, I think it's worth our time to be more intentional about our community. It takes a village. It takes a village. We can't be the only healthy men in our children's lives. If we aren't healthy men, then we need to seek out ways to become those healthy men that we would want our children to grow up to be like in the case of our sons, or the guy that we would want our daughters to bring home if that's something that they choose to do. But we often do this in isolation, and we are figuring it out by ourselves, or maybe we're just using the manual we got, which is how not to be if we didn't have a dad or dad wasn't the best. And I've been thankful to be able to collect more and more men who are fathers, who are figuring it out, so that when I'm figuring it out, I don't feel like I'm doing something unique or special. We all have to figure this out.
Absolutely.
We all have to figure this out. I think one of the first times you and I talked after you had your son, we talked about being fathers, and I told you then, I'm here for you, man.
Yeah.
I'm here for you. I don't have it all figured out, but I'm willing to share what I've learned and also figure it out with you because we need each other. We need each other, and if we do that intentionally, our children will ultimately benefit from it.
Yeah. No, I definitely like this whole process of like having like a kid. Like I see more and more valuable, like how like a Friday morning group I'm part of, like a bunch of guys, like how valuable that is. I see how valuable like just like our church community is for us. I see how valuable like different guys who are pouring into my life, like just how valuable that is for me. And then I see like how valuable it is for Elijah with like this older guy in a church group that we're part of, like how valuable it is whenever they interact with each other and like they like he's holding Elijah and they're like playing and stuff like that. And there's like this thing that happens. I don't know. It's hard to explain like unless you like see it. It's like this is good. This is right. And man, like it just feels so blessed. Like just to watch that stuff happening. Yeah.
We really organically a bunch of the questions that were submitted for today. We kind of got to almost all of them. So that's cool. Because less work for
We'll
me,
keep talking.
right? And y'all didn't know the questions.
We did
Y'all
not.
just kind of went there on your own, so that's pretty cool. As usual, if you have any questions for the pod, please submit it to Kim at howtobehappyhour.com. It might make the pod, or they'll just answer it, and we don't have to ask it.
There you go.
Some of our upcoming pods include, we're going to do one about New Year's resolutions, friend or foe. We have a great one coming up about Christmas movies. With my personal stance being Die Hard is the best Christmas movie ever. You're welcome to fight me. You can submit any questions in relationship to either of those topics. I think after the holidays, we're going to move into some topics. Specifically, I think we have one circling the concept of pornography, that we're going to address that here on the pod. And a few other, I also had somebody who wanted to talk about fantasy books and mental health. So I'm a nerd, so I'm here for that. So we might go that direction after the holidays. So any questions related to that, please send my way. But one of the questions that we didn't totally get to, so I think might be useful to ask and pose to the panelists here today is, how can mental health professionals better support fathers in recognizing and addressing their own mental health needs throughout their parenting journey? So in our role as a helper, direct care professional, what are some things that we can do to support fathers in navigating that well? And one of the things I prepared for today was sort of based on, in my role as a substance use counselor and working with fathers navigating the disease of addiction. So I have a pretty long history in working in like an alternative to state prison. That's where Johnny and I met, actually, once upon a time, working with...
I wasn't in the prison.
I was going to say, I don't know, Johnny. Do you want to clarify?
I should be clear. Johnny was one of my first doctoral
where you met Mike
supervised.
as well?
Different story there.
My cousin once said, this inmates, the interns program you are part of is working out pretty well because of the tattoos.
No, Johnny was one of my interns. I should be clear. Sorry, y'all. Sorry, Johnny. But working with dads, navigating the disease of addiction, trying to get back into their kids' lives and everything that goes with it. And I remember one of the conversations having with one of my clients, and they were real salty about it. But I essentially said, like, your child, no matter how beautiful, no matter how amazing, no matter how whole, complete, and perfect they may be, they also will be one of your biggest substance use triggers moving forward. And so we need to bake that into the model that your recovery, you still need to put your recovery above all else so that you can be a dad and be present and be attuned. And no matter how you are adopting an inherent risk by choosing to care about somebody else, because their struggles will be your struggles, their challenges will be your challenges. They're going to challenge you, give you some of your greatest joys and some of your greatest frustrations. And we know that sadness, frustration, anger can all be pretty big substance use triggers. So I would say that that's something that, especially for my substance use or my co-occurring professionals, that helping them understand that I work with a lot of folks that they find out that their girl's going to have a baby and they say like, well, this is it then. I'm just going to stay clean for my kids or stay sober for my kids. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's way too big to put on the shoulders of
An unborn child.
of an unborn child. Please don't do that. That's heavy for them. Let's talk about the ways, though, you can maintain recovery despite your child, not for your child.
Kids are not kickstands.
No, no.
Can I read that quote? I think it kind
Yeah,
of applies,
yeah.
right?
No, I love
More
that quote.
quotes.
Yeah. So this is from Peter Attia's book Outlive.
Ooh, that sounds like a good one to read.
It's more about like health and fitness, but the last chapter is about emotional and mental health, and he talks about just family pathology. And I don't know, this one spoke to me, but and this actually isn't. He quoted somebody else in the book, but it says family pathology rolls from generation to generation like a fire in the woods, taking down everything in its path until one person in one generation has the courage to turn and face the flames. That person brings peace to his ancestors and spares the children that follow. I want to be that person.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good one, right?
That is an amazing quote.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yes, please.
And very true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and so no, that was my dad struggled with substance abuse throughout my childhood. He was a functional alcoholic, I guess you would say. So it wasn't like there was no physical abuse or anything like that. But that was a huge. I don't know. I didn't want to do that, so I'm super intentional about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, my dad was a drug dealer.
There you go.
But as far as clients go, I have had the fortune of working with clients who did have a substance background as well. And I would say fortunate because it's some of the best work that I've ever been able to do in my career, period. I wouldn't be Dr. Johnny Pierce if it weren't for the clients I was able to work with in that capacity at PCS and even before that during my time doing training. So thank you all for letting me be a part of your process. That said, parenthood, as far as a trigger and a motivator, it is back and forth. And being able to have an open and honest conversation about that, because so many people who are dealing with substance issues are already feeling bad about themselves in so many different ways that it's hard to talk about not feeling like a great parent. Like that might be their one shining star, that I'm a parent and my kid hasn't been touched by my goofiness and the terrible things. Or, oh, how horrible I feel because my child has been touched by my goofy. I haven't been there for them. I've been incarcerated, or I used substances while I was in there, while they were in my care. I was working with someone who their partner dozed off from opiates while driving. Thankfully, the car did not get into an accident, but their child was in the back seat. And when the authorities showed up, the person was still asleep. So, like, that kid's going to have, like, there's little doubt that kid's going to have that as memory. Yeah. And how do you advise somebody, how do you encourage somebody when they've had experiences like that or could potentially have experiences like that? It normally starts with the basics that we've been talking about, that you're going to get better with this over time as you work to better yourself. And the better you work on yourself, the better things will be for your child. But your child can never be that lone star, cannot be that motivator, because what happens when your child isn't maybe performing well in school or isn't behaving well? Then that becomes a good excuse for you to then not care and let go. And that's a juggling act for most people, because they're like, okay, so I really want to care about my kid, but my kid can't be the reason why I'm doing this. Okay, how's that supposed to work? And then in the event that I've had clients who were fathers and not dealing with substance issues, figuring out how to make time for their children because work was so primary in many cases. Carving out that time, knowing when to turn the computer off if they're working from home, knowing how to actually set boundaries around the job when they ask them to come in on days that they're supposed to be off, navigating those things with their spouse if they happen to have one. All of that is definitely things that I see in my practice even to this day. So it's no small thing. Great question.
I think we were talking on the pre-podcast before we actually got live. Just the stereotypes of there's not a lot of positive stereotypes of fathers in our community. So in our roles, whether we're therapists or in administration or in a community, just one living that and trying to humbly model that, but encouraging that and finding that balance of, I think sometimes like, no, fathers are important. So if you're supervising people and they're not trying to engage that dad, no, that's important, but also not having a stereotype, well, if there's not a dad, then the kid's never going to make it and they're not going to. No, there's a balance, and culture can shift on either end, as everything in our world is so polarized. There's a medium spectrum that you can get to, like, they're important. So yes, engage, and if they're not there, how do you support that family with the need of that father? But finding balance is
and
always
it is
that challenge.
I supervise a lot of family based now, which I love the family based program. It's so fun to do ESFT work. And I love doing systemic work, so it fits. But I've worked with early career clinicians, and they're like, well, dad doesn't want to be involved. And I'm like, well, and like,
How did you
get
try to engage
dad involved. And they're like, well, he's a little scary. I was like, I don't give a fuck, get back in there. Like, get dad involved. And like, it is that balance. It's that push me and pull you. And I always say, like, you're the herding dog. It is your job to go in and just run circles around them until they get closer and closer together. Like, don't run straight at dad, because they might scatter, right? But circle around, herd them closer and closer and closer, and you will see a difference. But keep trying, keep extending that hand to dad, because I think so often, especially with early career clinicians, but I think it can be throughout our career, that rejection of, I don't want to be involved in therapy. The therapist might take it personally. The therapist might attribute that to some of their own individual factors, rather than recognizing, like, dad's scared, dad's overwhelmed, dad feels incompetent, dad doesn't feel as though he has a role within the family system. And so helping them redefine that.
And the expectation
so powerful.
has never been there.
And the
so he
expectation,
doesn't even know what to do.
his intergenerational patterns, he's not ready to turn and face the flames yet. But you could go shoulder to shoulder with him and he might turn around. Just get your shoulder up there. It might work.
And I think too, like there's a big piece of vulnerability that comes in with that, right? And
For the therapist.
yeah,
as
for
well
the
as father.
therapist and the father. And I think sometimes as therapists we forget what it's like to be vulnerable with someone that might be coming in and saying, hey, like, there's a different road for us to go on right here. And whenever we forget that from like our own personal journeys with that, I think that's whenever we lose focus on how to help the dads with that, because they need someone to help teach them that. They need someone to help direct them with that.
And to normalize the fact that they don't know.
Yeah.
Hey, man, you don't
Yeah.
know? Sorry.
Yeah.
You didn't get the help that you needed early on, but I'm here to be a help now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the second, so I was thinking about the word vulnerability, and I was thinking about the word supports as well. I think we really do a disservice to, the population that we work with if we're not encouraging them to go out and find supports outside of the group. Yeah. Because, I mean, so many times, like, I've seen, folks get discharged from our program and them not be required to, like, hey, like, while you're here, like, you have to go get involved with something, and, we'll talk about that stuff. And then they come back, like, a couple months later,
Starting
and
from
it's
scratch.
like starting from scratch. It's like, what happened to all the supports? Yeah, screw that. I did that because you told me I had to do it. I didn't want it. And it's like, man, if we can just develop that and encourage that and make that an active part of our treatment, I find that, like, man, people don't come back, longer, which is good. And then, if they do come back, they have that extra layer of support there with it that actually makes treatment useful for them.
We should start sending people off and say, don't come back, call back.
Yeah.
Because I've gotten some calls, even though I'm working in Virginia now, I've gotten calls from former clients that I worked with here in Pennsylvania. While I was in Pennsylvania, apparently this was back when Trish Young was with us, the PCS got contacted by someone I worked with in Chicago and said, hey, you guys got Johnny, he's great. And obviously I didn't even know, like, I'm like, wait, what? And they're like, yeah, this is the person's name. And I'm like, yeah, I worked with that person. They're like, well, yeah, they just wanted to, say how great you were. And I'm just like, well, that's amazingly complimentary. But when we do the job well, and I'm thankful in those cases, those clients felt like I did the job well, they don't come back. They end up calling back and just want to, hey, I just want you to know this is how things are going with me now. I'm doing well. Thank you for helping me. So we don't always get to hear the end of the story. More times than not, we don't. But sometimes they call back.
No, there was something, and I lost it because I like that message as well. But it was this. I think. Oh, here it is. I think so often also as clinicians, our own fatherhood, our own experiences with our dads impact the way we work with the dads, either within family therapy, within individual therapy, but there who comes into our practice. And I think that's where that person, the therapist piece comes in, and kind of looking at how your own origin story plays out in the therapeutic work that you do. And so often I've worked with clinicians where I'm like, well, tell me about your dad. And they're like, that's none of your business. I'm like, well, that's fine. You don't need to tell me about it, but I do want you to think about it and how that might be playing out in this particular therapeutic problem that you did happen to bring to me. So in that part, that's my business. I'm just going to ask you to look at this thing on this side of the line and see what's there. I don't know. Take it to someone whose business it belongs to. But just see what might be there. And I think many of us have, we're human beings that have an origin story, and we have relationships with our mothers and our fathers and our siblings and our communities and the year we were born into and the socioeconomics class in which we grew up. And I think all of that will influence the therapeutic work that we do. And so I think if you're working with a father, I think you got to be also thinking about your own journey, either as a father or with your own father, because that's bound to show up there. And so I guess that would be my advice as not a father to those doing that type of work.
And at PCS, we have 2% of the therapist groups that happen. So I guess
You
if
can
you're an
look at it
employee,
there.
look at it. Yeah, and come there. Yeah, contact me.
Roy Smith, you may know him. This Knights of the 21st Century, and one of the things, I've been in therapy, but one of the things that probably was most impactful in my personal growth was just going through that curriculum. And some of it's his material and other material, but just talking about different wounds, like an all-alone wound or a mother wound, and then, the father wound. And it was really sitting in that material and just listening. And I'm a group of like a couple hundred guys, listening. And it's like, tears started coming to my eyes. I was like realizing, okay, I used to think everything was perfect. Then you kind of goes like, oh, it was all bad. And it's like, then you try to really get a realistic view of like, hey, we're human. We do some really good things. We do some tough things. Going back to that vulnerability, some awareness, always trying to get better at it. But just that acknowledgement. And when we're in a group and we're talking about our dads, there's 5 or 6 guys. It's like some people like almost feel embarrassed that they had a good dad, and others like, yeah, my dad, I never knew him.
There.
Right.
The guys who have good experiences with their dads,
you feel guilty, like
their
you can't
stories
share it, right?
are supposed to be hush hush
Right.
because everybody else is saying how their dad wasn't there, their dad
Right.
wasn't great, and it's just like, no, we actually need you to speak up and share that experience because they exist. Good dads are out there.
And you learn from both. You learn from the absent. You learn from a really shitty dad.
Yeah.
And you learn from a dad who's really good. But there's no perfect. There's no perfect dad. And I think if any of us hold that standard out there for externally or hold it for ourselves,
Good luck.
good luck.
No, and it's been an interesting life experience for me in that my dad wrote a fatherhood book. And I remember reading it. Roy Smith, Robert Amaya. It's called On Fatherhood, I believe.
It's a big book.
It's a big book. It's a big book. Through Live Up Resources.
Which I share when I help sell the book. I'm like, if he doesn't read it, just use it as a weapon.
In the event of a home invasion,
Exactly.
this will also protect your family. And so, I remember, and it was such a surreal experience because one, they're like stories about me throughout my childhood, and there are moments where I remember those stories a little bit differently than you, but like we each have our own lens. We're all constructionists in the end. But reading through it, and I really relate to that process of like I grew up and like my dad was it, and then there were moments where it was like fuck that guy.
And then he was shit.
Yes, he was
Shit.
to like this more balanced view. That's his next book.
another word?
That's the part 2 that you use in the event of a 2 intruder scenario. But I think reading through it and being like, man, yeah, and there it is, and it's interesting even like his own journey in fatherhood because he was.
Right.
He was a provider until I was 13 and started smoking weed on the roof of the Hershey Free Church. And then he's like, I'm going to show up now. And it's like, wrong, brother. Like, too little, too late. Let's do this. And I think at that point in time, there was this really weird balance that we had to figure out.
Right. And then knowing Roy's story, his dad and his growing up, and you talk about the generational and standing, standing in the flame or changing the arc. It's it gives you a little more grace.
So
and,
much
and
more
then
grace.
and understand, like, no one's perfect. There's things that could have been better, things that could have been worse, and just gives you some grace. And I think that's where I've gotten, at least with my dad. And he has Alzheimer's, he's in a memory care center, so I'm kind of in that interesting spot. Like, doesn't really, like, I can visit him, he doesn't really know who I am or not. So, but you try to appreciate the good things, but also no. It's not. You don't have to put any. I always say to people, there should not be a statue of any human being in the world. Joe Paterno, example number one. But no statues of people, because we all have our strengths, but we all have our areas of where we've fallen. And I think when you put that expectation up, and we talk a lot about at PCS about cultural humility in all areas. And I think parent humility is important as well.
That's the running joke in the Ernest house, is like, we're 10% better than our parents. That's all we're shooting for. And like, both of us, when we look at our dads, neither of us had perfect fathers. But then if we look at our grandfathers, holy cats. Like, they are like way better than 10% than what they got. Like, they took what they got and they turned a corner. And then it's our responsibility as parents to keep turning that corner, realizing also that we will transmit a lot of the same traumas down through the generations, but we're doing it 10% less than our parents did.
Nice.
And that, we think, is statistically significant.
That's the plan.
So I think,
When you write your daughterhood book, that's what you should write there. That's your shot.
but I want mine to be leather bound.
Just Kim looking at the
Leather bound.
Maybe a different cover too.
But no, on Fatherhood, liveupresources.com. Check it out. I think it's good. So that brings us to our last call. And you touched on it briefly, but I think we should unpack it a little bit more fully. And it is this notion that there are literally very few, you identified a couple, and so I think we need to go there. But there are very few good depictions of fathers within the media. And when we watch, like, the shows, I was thinking of, like, Shameless. Whew, not a good dad. Family Guy. Peter Griffin is like the epitome of terrible father.
Shut up, Meg.
Yeah, shut up. Like,
Did he make Homer Simpson look better than?
I
I think he
Or
was
is
an
it
up,
tie?
I think Homer would be an upgrade over Peter.
yeah, I mean, if I had to pick, I
At
think
least
I would.
Homer typically talked to his children periodically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they weren't a complete.
And he had a job that we actually kept up with that he seemed to try to do well. He was in the nuclear. He's ahead of his time.
So poor depictions of fatherhood, and so we're saying, like, being better than what you got. But how do you do that when you look out into the world and it's like, man, like, better than Peter Griffin at least? Like, isn't that slightly better?
Well, yeah, the point that I brought up is we all watch different TV. And I think that we all get exposed to different TV. And I think that because of me being black, me growing up in the community I grew up in, there were certain shows that I definitely found myself looking at more often than not. I thought about Family Matters and
I
Crow
loved
Win.
Family Matters.
Me too. Yeah.
Well,
TGIF.
the thing is, I liked Family Matters back when it was actually about the family. Family Matters actually ended up becoming about Urkel, and it kind of ruined the show. I was showing my oldest that show when it first started and watching the set change, and then watching eventually the focus shift to Urkel and just this goofy young black kid. And I'm just like, man, you can see that something happened here. I'd love to hear the story behind all that. But Carl Winslow wasn't a perfect dad. He was a bit of a goofball, but he was there for his kids. And he talked to him, and there was, like, at the end of the show, there's a little lesson that you learn. Like, they go out of their way to, like, make it clear, like, we were trying to get a point across in this episode, and that was there. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I think everybody's watched Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I think it's, like, got out to everybody, but it definitely was trying to provide a different view of what it's like to be black, young, and male. And Uncle Phil was a lot of our dads. He was to us what he was to Will, where we came into his home, we got to see affluence, we got to see someone that was accomplished, but we also got to see someone who's real. He hadn't lost touch where he's from. But they were pretty much the only two that we could think of that were positive. I've seen other shows that were, mostly black. I can't remember. what was the name of the show? Damon Wayans had a show. It was him and
I was thinking of Blackish, but even then,
Blackish, yeah.
kind of a goofy
that's-
dad, but he's
yeah.
a good dad.
Yeah, and they actually have generations there because you got Lawrence Fishburne as the grandfather. So yeah, but like those shows, I think that it's been very intentional on the part of the Black community to like, if you're gonna put us on TV, if we're gonna back this, you can't make our men look bad. You can't make our women look bad. There may be episodes where they highlight someone who is stereotypical, but like typically the focus of the show is not on stereotypical depictions of what it means to be an absent father or something like that. Like that, there's an episode about that. Or to, be a drug addict father. Like it might be an episode about the uncle that was struggling with drug issues. So those efforts, I think, are reasons why you're more likely to find those healthy depictions in those spaces. But outside of that, it is rough. I think you mentioned the Blue Bloods and that being a show that you felt like a dad really got showcased well on there. But a lot of the stuff is making guys look goofy. If they're not goofy,
Kind of evil.
evil,
Breaking Bad.
disinterested in the kid
Walter
and
White.
their
Is
Is
development.
that not a good model? No. He was trying to do. Oh no.
He,
was it for his
he
kids?
did have a good cause at first.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm dying of cancer. I
we could
want
do a
to
whole
leave
new
something for my
Breaking
family.
Bad. Yeah, we could have a whole podcast there. Just,
Oh yeah, I believe they have a Breaking Bad podcast. It's
Probably.
not as good,
exclusively
not
about
as
the
good
show.
as this one would be.
Of course not. Of course not. But yeah, so yeah, I think that is something that men maybe need to speak more about. We need to challenge those who are putting out TV shows and movies about how they make men look. Because although there are guys out there who do not represent us well, they maybe are not the norm. Maybe they are the minority, but they're the image that's pushed.
Yeah, the solid dad doing good parenting is not going to sell on the news or on the media. Like, right? It's kind of boring if you're just doing the right thing. So it's the extra.
Unless
stuff
you're in
that
a
gets-
parking lot, that's when you'll be a star.
The one that came to mind, it didn't come to mind when we were talking about this earlier, and I appreciate because it's a really popular kids show now, and so maybe things are shifting. But Bluey,
Bluey's dad.
Yeah.
Bluey's
love
dad is
Bluey.
like he makes me feel terrible about myself
I
as
would
a
leave
dad.
for Bluey's dad.
Yeah, I
Particular.
wouldn't blame you.
can't
Yeah.
blame you.
Oh man, it's a good. But what's
We
his
had
name?
Caillou, which was terrible.
Bandit.
Bandit, yeah. But no, he's very involved. He's at home. He's interested in what it's a great show.
Plays
Ada
with
Twist Scientist, another good show where a good dad's present.
Yeah, there is.
There you go. See, maybe it's the tide is turning.
Maybe the tie's
There
turning.
we go. Yeah. So
But like the only good dad in Game of Thrones loses his head in the first
In the very first episode.
yeah.
Oh, no,
Spoiler.
yeah.
Spoiler.
Yeah.
first episode, first couple episodes.
Oh yeah, no, he made it past the first episode. He was cutting someone's head off in the first
There you
episode.
go.
Well,
Great
you know,
dad,
he's
yeah.
still a good dad.
Yeah,
He's
Ned
still a
Stark.
Ned
Ned.
Stark.
My father
Ned.
forever.
That's
Ned
right.
didn't make it though.
Poor Ned.
Either. And the other dads weren't great in that show.
No.
No. None of them. There was absolutely none.
None of them.
None of them. They were all terrible people.
Yeah.
Yikes. Great show though.
Yeah.
Well, I guess on that note, thank y'all. Thanks for joining me here today. Deeply appreciate everyone coming to share their experience, strength, and hope. And we have a couple upcoming pods. So, like I said, we've got one coming up on porn. We've got one coming up on New Year's resolutions. We have another one all about Christmas media and what it means. So,
Starts
don't.
in November.
That's quite a lineup we got there.
Quite a lineup.
Porn and Christmas.
Porn and Christmas. What more
I just
could
want
you
to make that
ask
phone
for?
call to the. Hey, I want you on the porn podcast.
Well, I'm waiting for volunteers. Literally, no one
let me
has
know.
raised their hand yet. So maybe I won't be having a porn podcast. But
Your hands
either.
might be busy.
Oh, there it
I
is.
guess we should have ended there. I'm sorry.
And that's where we end. So thank you so much. Questions for the pod, Kim at howtobehappyhour.com.